Hi, you're watching Freedomachine. We are in my new garage. It's an absolute mess. I'm trying to organize it. We moved here about 8-9 months ago. I got the garage installed and I have all the stuff in here and I need to move it around. But this is going to be my future workshop, and it is from here that I will do all my new videos. And until all this mess is sorted, I thought I'd do a little video about how to fix an electrical problem on the Super Ténéré. And the bike is really dirty. It hasn't been washed since pretty much after long Norway round. It was parked for all the duration of the coronavirus, so I hope you guys don't mind that. If you do, I'm sorry. Okay, so some of the Gen 1 Super Ténérés have an issue where if they're standing for too long in the rain, they might have an electrical issue with the dash. So what happens is that the reset button stops working. Now I believe that this is some corrosion that is happening, and we see now if we can fix that today. So I think the easiest way to remove the dash is to remove the windshield, that little plastic that is underneath here, and then there should be two screws that I can see by looking into this opening here, and that should release the dash. I'm not 100% sure. I might be able to get in there. Yeah, I might be able to get in there and remove those two screws there without removing the windshield. That might make it much easier. Let's see if we can do that. Very hard to do that with the camera in the way, but it seems, fuck it. Let's see if I remove the dash, if I might be able to remove that screw later on. I'm holding a torch here, camera in the way, it's all harder. Turns out there is a third screw in the middle, I think, which is holding it. So I managed to remove the top part, but the bottom part is still in place. So I'm going to remove the windshield just to make it easier. Get something small, push that little button in, and you can remove this little clip. And actually one more here, one more here. This comes off, this comes off. Okay. Just get them out with the magnet. 1 and 2. If you really care about your bike, maybe you should avoid to scratch it here. And that part is covered anyway, but just in case. Now we have here the connector, so just remove this cover, this boot. As usual, there's a little clip at the bottom that we can press, and here we go. It's free. That takes literally 5 minutes to remove. So I believe that this are just decorative, so they are not going to I don't think we need to undo these because there are four, more than four, there are 6, 7, 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 normal screws or real ones. So we just take a screwdriver, again the camera in the way, and we go with the first. So that's all of it, and this opens very easy. Okay, we can see that there is a rubber gasket going around this, and what I believe is that this with time this gasket gets a little bit hard, especially if the bike is sitting in the sun, and it starts to leak after some time. When I touch it with the screwdriver, it doesn't feel very fresh, let's say. See if I can get it out. Yeah, it feels really old. Just pull it out. So after looking at it a little bit, these screws, they are not actually holding the PCB, the circuit, to the plastic, but they are holding they are holding some plastic elements together. So it seems like everything is sticking together, but after pulling for a while, I noticed that it just comes out here. So now on the left side there is a little circuit that is actually connected to the plastic here with one screw. So before we can lift out the main board, we need to undo this little connector here. Okay, so let's get this out of the way, and the circuit is out. Okay, let's put this aside. So this is our reset button here, and this is the set button, how you want to call it. I'm not even sure if this is the reset button or how it's called, but it does reset stuff normally. So I don't know if you can see it, but I can definitely see corrosion here on this track. And there is a via here. A via is a little hole that brings signal from one side to the other of the board, and they are heavily corroded. So I need to figure out what's going on there. Is it actually the button that is corroded inside as well? Is the track maybe broken? So we need to get access there somehow. Let's see if we can do that. So this is the reset button. Reset button. So we turn the board around. This is the reset button. Okay. So first we want to make sure that the reset button is actually working. So what the reset button does is it connects these two pins to these two pins when you press the button. So it's it's pulling down the signal. So this is a ground plane. So when you press the button, it connects the ground plane to these two pins here, and it should pull down this little via here, which is the via that we saw in the front. So we have the signal here going to the via, and then this signal is going to the other side of the board through the via, and we check if that via is corroded. But first of all, let's see if the button is actually working. So to do that, we need to use our multimeter. Make sure that the leads are connected correctly. Usually you can see from the scale that you're selecting what type of connection you need to make. The black one almost always goes to the ground, to the common pin. and then in this case we want to measure resistance. So we can see here the resistance. Plug this in, and then to check if the connector is if the button is making contact when we press it, we want to go to the lowest setting, and in this case when we go to the lowest setting it will emit a sound because there is a symbol here. So if we touch the two leads, so we don't need this to be in the visual here. So we go back to the dash. Remember, this one was the reset button. So if we touch the two pins, there shouldn't be any sound. If we touch it, there shouldn't be any sound. Okay, now we need to figure out how we can press the button and touch the two contacts at the same time. That's going to be a little bit tricky. If you get somebody to help you, it will be much easier. It will be really hard for me now. Let's see. So get something in there. Yeah, I can press this. Let's go with this one. Now if you're good with Chinese food, you might be able to do that on your own. I'm not good with Chinese food. Really bad actually. Maybe I should do it with my right hand. Let's see. I guess this is how you eat Chinese food. Okay. No sound. Okay, so I'm pressing the button and it's making sound. So the button is fine. The button is absolutely fine. Now, as I said earlier, so we press the button, so we connect this side of the button with this side of the button. This becomes all ground. Then we have a little trace here going to this via. So we want to see if the signal goes from this side of the via to the other side of the via, because you can see the vias are exposed. They don't have this green stuff on top of them, which is a bit of a bad design feature, because this way they can corrode. They should have covered them with this green stuff. When they're covered, they're called tinted vias, and they're much less prone to corrosion. So let's check. Just touch the via on one side, touch it on the other side. It's going to be very tricky. Again with the camera in the middle. And there is no signal. Touching the via, nothing happens. So the via is gone. That's the reason why our reset button is not working. Via is broken. It's corroded and the signal is not passing. So if you look through the PCB, if you shine a light through the PCB, you can actually see that the full trace is missing. So we have that trace on the right, that is the one coming from the set button, which is completely fine. And then we have a trace, the reset trace, that is completely missing. So not only the via somehow fell out or came off the PCB, but also the trace. So now, how can we fix that? One way of fixing it is to remove the display, but the display is hard soldered, or how you want to call it, to the PCB. So to remove the display, you need to heat the whole board so that you can actually pull off the PCB, the display. It is not possible to desolder one pin at a time and pull it out. That's going to be impossible, and the full connector needs to come out all at once. This requires special tooling. So if we look at the via and then the trace on the other side, we obviously understand at this stage that the trace is disappearing underneath the display. So where does it go? How can we figure this out? That's very tricky. So you need to have a little bit of knowledge of PCB design. So I'm an electronic engineer, luckily, and I know how to get there. So following a little bit the logic of PCB designs, you want to have similar things, always following more or less a similar path on the PCB. So we already can see that the first part of the trace coming from the set button is following the same path as the trace coming from the reset button. So I presume that they will travel very long on the PCB somewhere and get to the point where they have to go close to each other. And since there is no component on the other side of the PCB, I could see it by peeking a little bit underneath the display. The signal has to go at some stage from one side, from the bottom side of the PCB to the top side of the PCB again. So it has to come out somewhere through another via. So what I did to find where the reset button goes, I just touched the via here and I started to look. So I know that this is some sort of microcontroller. So I suppose it has to go to the microcontroller. So I start to touch a little bit all the vias around the microcontroller until, so just touch like that. I know already which one it is. So when I get here, I can hear the sound. So the signal is going from here to here, from the bottom of the PCB. So I see that there is a via just next to it, which obviously is not working at the moment because it's disconnected. But I'm 50% sure that that's the via that we're looking at. So what I did, I tried to touch the via here. In a second. So yeah, the other via next to it. Try to touch it, hold the PCB. Again, really hard. Touch it and hold the PCB. And I started to scrape a little bit on the trace. On the trace that is exposed, the reset trace, which I scraped off a little bit with a little scraper, how you want to call it, a little knife. I scraped off the green stuff so I could make contact with it, and I know now that that's the other via that we need to make contact with. So we know that it's this one. I guess that this was the hardest part now. At least for me, it won't be a hard part for you because you know already which one you have to connect. Now you need to have some really good soldering skills because you want to bring a little wire from this side of the button to that little via there. Probably soldering to that via is the easiest solution. So you need to find some really thin wire, piece of wire that you can actually slide into that via and solder. That's going to be really challenging, but let's see if we can do that together. What we can do is take a wire, piece of cable, and cut perfect, and we just want one of them. Just one strand of the cable we want. So just pull that off. Can you see that? Just one core, or how you want to call it, one strand. I don't remember the name. So one side we stick it into that via. Perfect. So make sure that the tip of your iron is really hot. it's better if it's really hot than try to poke around on the PCB for 1 hour with the cold iron. So see, it should melt the solder really fast. And also make sure that the tip is very clean, it's very pointy. Also you need a tip that is very sharp. So originally this tip wasn't really sharp, and what I did is I just used a file how you call it, and I made it really sharp, and then I made sure that it was shiny. You don't want this to be have a rough surface, because then the solder doesn't flow properly. So I made it very shiny, and it's working really well. It's very pointy, and it's melting the solder immediately, and that's what we want. So it's better really hot. I have it at the maximum heat. Just go in there really fast and solder whatever you have to solder, and get off the PCB immediately. Otherwise, the via will come off. So let's see if we can get this done. It's really tricky to get in there. Also solder, if you have a very fine one, that's better. This one isn't the best. Let's see if we can make it happen without having a disaster here. I think I did it. There is a resistor pad just next to it, which is connected to the via, so that will give you a little bit of more room, more solder space. So let's see if that was done properly. So that looks very good to me. By the way, I'm using my phone as a sort of microscope. I went into the macro setting, and this actually gives me a much better view than my eyes, which is odd, but it looks very good. It looks very strong. So this is really the hardest part of the entire job if you don't have good soldering skills. Just be very careful you don't poke around for too long on the PCB, otherwise you will destroy it. Heating, my iron here is at the max. I waited at least 5 minutes for it to become really hot, and that just works perfect every time. So you have to remember that is actually a wire, so it can make contact with other parts of the PCB, and we want to avoid that. There are a couple of ways you can do that. One way is just to put a piece of tape underneath the trace and have it going from one side to the other, and maybe another piece of tape on top that will kind of cover it. Or you can use things like little heat shrinks, and I just thought this is maybe the way I want to approach it. So I slide the heat shrink through here until I get there, and now I need to figure out a way to make it shrink without heating up the whole board. Just don't put on fire the PCB. Right. That's fine. Take another one, and we try to slide it over the other one a little bit. Oh crap. Okay. No. Okay, that's that done. Now we need to solder the other side. Okay, so we can just cut this very close to the pin with whatever you have. same as before, we're going to solder this. So in this case it should be easier. You have a big pad there, solder that. So let's try. In this case I'm just putting a bit of solder to the iron. There you go. And that's it. A little bit of solder on the iron. Make contact with the pin and squeeze the little wire in, and that's it when it's liquid. And that's done. So now we can make an obvious test. Just to see if something happened, something strange happened. You can see if there's contact between here and here, and there is contact. Another test that we can do, and here we need to again use my Chinese eating skills. Try to press the button and see if actually, so by touching here on the opposite side of the contact of the button and here, and that works. So I hope that this will fix our speedo. Let's put it together and we can test it. Well, make sure that you don't have any debris inside your display, inside your screen. Just clean it as good as you can, because you don't want to have put this together and then have some parts flying around inside the dash. That could be very annoying. Just use a brush. Maybe you can use a hoover. I don't know, that's up to you. Also make sure that there isn't anything here. Okay. Also, when you hold the PCB, always try to hold it from the edges. You shouldn't put your fingers on the components, possibly. You might give it a nice electric discharge and ruin the whole thing. So this goes all back together as the same way we took it apart. Maybe we want to fix that wire a little bit in place, glue it somehow so that it doesn't move around too much. Remember, also on this side there was this cable. Anyway, that comes together nicely. Slide this contact back in, and for these connectors there's only one way you can put them back in, so don't worry about that. Just fix this somehow so that it doesn't move around too much. Maybe some hot glue would be good here on the big component, but probably not the best solution. Anyway, if it comes apart, I know how to fix it. Let's leave it like that. Remember that there is this little seal that you need to put back. I don't know why I took it out in the first place, probably just to show it to you. If you leave it in there, you're going to save yourself this step. You might want to use some silicone here or something. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if this is corroded because of water entrance, because it's a bit odd that water went inside and attacked just that little via Probably there is some other reason. Also because this is a common fault, and it's strange that it's always affecting the same area of the PCB. It might be a wrong PCB design, a mistake on the PCB design. Maybe for some odd reason there is too much current going through that via when you press the button, and that is somehow ruining the via, which I find very strange, because usually buttons, they have very limited current going through them, because they just carry a little signal to say on and off, and that's it. So there is no reason for high currents to go through a button. Nevertheless, that's what's happening most of the time. So I can put the back cover back on. So let's put this all back together. I'm just gonna put this one, the 2 screws, let's say. We're going to test it on the bike straight away. So we're back at the bike. Let's put in the connector here. Please make it easy for me, because I'm an idiot. This has to go the other way around. And it's back in. You can see some movement happening. Let's go back in there. Nice. Let's see what happens. And the reset button is back. Perfect. Happy days. I'm happy that worked. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't know what I was facing, but I think I'm the first one on YouTube to share a video like that on fixing this problem. So I hope this is going to be useful for you, because it's going to set changing the dash is going to set you back 200 300 euro. So that's a lot of money for a little fix. You can buy the tools on Amazon for like I don't know, 20 euro altogether. I got soldering iron, some solder, and that's pretty much all you need. All the other tools are fairly basic, and yeah, I'm not going to now share how I will assemble the whole thing. I mean, if you got to this stage, you will be able to assemble it again. So I hope you really liked it. If you did, please subscribe and hit the like button.